The Republican Party managed to spend $100 million in the last few weeks to beat itself in Texas. Trump has more power today than he has ever had. Just ask John Cornyn. This is Dr. Gary Kellner, and I would like to welcome you to a special edition of Fair Game. Last night, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, one of the most notoriously ethically challenged characters in American public life, managed to upset John Cornyn, who at one point was a breath away from being the Republican majority leader of the United States Senate. John Cornyn has spent more than 40 years serving the people of Texas. John Cornyn was the first Republican to win a statewide office in 1994. John Cornyn is an authentic conservative. He has voted repeatedly with the president and with his party. Now, John Cornyn is a Texan, which means he is an independent thinker. And John Cornyn observed in 2023 that Donald Trump was yesterday's news and it was time for the Republican Party to move on. That is a really bad move in the party of Trump. It wouldn't have been so bad if another person had been nominated. It would have seemed prescient if Trump had been defeated by Kamala Harris, otherwise known as the cackler-in-chief. But alas, Donald Trump was elected to his second term. And one thing has to be said about the president. He has an extremely long memory. There's a great line about Southerners that applies to Donald Trump. And it is often said that a Southerner never forgets an offense or forgives an insult. That applies to President Trump. And whether it was Liz Cheney who called for his impeachment after the election of 2020, or whether it is John Cornyn or Thomas Massie, Donald Trump does not forgive. He gets even. So it's an interesting scorecard. The Republican Party managed to spend $100 million in the last few weeks to beat itself in Texas. And they managed to spend $30 million in Kentucky to beat themselves. It's hard to find a more conservative member of the United States Congress than Tom Massie. And whether his successor will be or not, we do not know. But we do know this, that Thomas Massie's sins were sufficiently grave to require his elimination from that august body of the United States House of Representatives. Well, of course, it doesn't end here. For the last 10 months, the president has been pushing anywhere he could to get state legislatures to do something they're only supposed to do once every 10 years. After there's a national census, we redraw congressional districts. But the president's team has been looking at this for a little while and knowing that they had a razor-thin majority in the House and that it would be hard to hold, most presidents find it very hard to hold the majority in the midterms, that they needed a little help. So they pushed the button in Texas and Indiana and South Carolina and Florida and Alabama to redraw congressional lines to get more House seats. Now, Whatever one says about Indiana, Indianans are notoriously independent, overwhelmingly small town, rural folks. They don't need or want a lot of interference from the federal government, and certainly not in drawing the lines of representation for congressional seats. So their first response was, thanks but no thanks. We will take this matter up again when the next census calls for it. So Donald Trump did what no president has done in American history. He utilized the full resources of the National Republican Party to defeat the 5 Republicans who kept the redistricting from occurring. And at this moment, I am proud to report that this investment of millions of dollars of the Republican National Committee's money was successful. The Republicans beat themselves in Indiana, just as they had in Texas and in Kentucky. Now, it may seem to some of my Republican friends that I am being uncharitable toward the president. I really am not. It is amazing, in fact, that a second-term president has this much juice, because second-term presidents normally find that the apogee of their influence is on the day of their second inauguration, and immediately the ship starts taking on water. Trump has more power today than he has ever had. Just ask John Cornyn, who in the first round of the primary a few weeks ago was neck and neck with Ken Paxton. And last night, against a miserable candidate, John Cornyn lost by almost 30%. That is a statement of President Trump's hold on the Republican Party. Now, politics is notoriously fickle. And if the Republicans get their heads handed to them in the fall, then I suspect that in the great quote of John F. Kennedy, when talking about the Bay of Pigs, he said, success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan. We're going to find out that if, in fact, the Democrats claim the House again, and if they get the Senate, there'll be a lot of finger pointing. And there'll be a lot of folks on Capitol Hill blaming the president for what's happened. I'm not part of those circles. It really isn't my place to point the finger. But I would simply observe this. This president has dominated American politics from the moment he descended the elevator at Trump Tower to this. Democrats thought that when he lost the election in 2020, that was going to be the end of it. They did not know their boy. Donald Trump doesn't take defeat casually. And he had things he wanted to do. And he was greatly helped by Joe Biden, who was awake on at least 2 or 3 afternoons every week during his 4-year term. Now, Joe Biden was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but he seems to be one of our worst foreign relations presidents. What we did in Afghanistan was absolutely shameful, turning over thousands of Afghanis who supported us and served us to their deadly enemies. Most of them are dead. I thought the United States could not behave in a more shameful way than it did in 1975 when we bailed out of Vietnam. Afghanistan was worse. And Joe Biden seemed not to pay a lot of attention to inflation. He seemed not to be able to make up his mind exactly how he wanted to support Ukraine. He was better than Obama, but that really isn't saying much. Obama sent them pancakes and blankets. neither of which have been known to be successful weapons against a tank. Trump consistently outperforms the predictions of his critics. I remember when he came down that escalator, folks said he'll never top 5%. And he did in the first few weeks. Then he won't possibly go over 10%. Then he can't possibly win primaries. And all along, he picked off more seasoned, successful Republican politicians. What we see in the spring primaries of 2026 is a president whose hold on his party is absolute. And before the Democrats engage in too much self-congratulation about the circular firing squad in Texas, let's just remind ourselves that he won 2 out of the 3 presidential campaigns he ran in, and he didn't lose many primaries. There was once a report that Mark Twain had died, and a reporter came to him and asked him if, in fact, he was Samuel Clemens, and informed him of the report. And famously, Mark Twain said, "The rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated." Well, I would say the prediction of Donald Trump's political demise have been greatly exaggerated. And last night reminds us there's a lot of gas in the tank with this president. This is Dr. Gary Kellner. I want to thank you for joining me in this special edition of Fair Game.